Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Here are the headlines we are tracking this evening. Former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh dies at 92. He was suffering from age-related issues. As Finance Minister in 1991, he unleashed India's economy with liberalisation, reforms. His decade-long stint as Prime Minister saw landmark legislations including right to information, rural jobs guarantee, right to education, food security and the Indo-US nuclear deal. President Murmu, Prime Minister Modi, Congress Party top brass and leaders cutting across political parties pay rich tributes to former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Union government announces a 7-day state mourning. The funeral with full state honours will take place tomorrow. The rupee continues to plumb new depths after a volatile session, weakens by more than 25 paise and ends at a record low despite an RBI intervention to stem the free fall. Sensex and Nifty gain 1% this week even as volumes remain thin. Mid-cap index remains flat. Auto and pharma stocks gain, but metal stocks decline. The gap between urban and rural India is narrowing according to the government's annual household expenditure and consumption survey. The bottom 5% of rural population sees a 22% increase in consumption, but the gap between the rich and the poor remains stark. The top 5% is spending and consuming 5 times more than the bottom 5%, even as they see a decline in consumption. JSW Energy set to acquire renewable energy platform O2 Power for $1.4 billion. O2 Power is a joint venture between Swedish asset manager EQT Partners and Singapore's Temasek. Consolidation continues in the cement sector. Birla Group's Ultratech picks up nearly 9% stake from the promoters of Star Cement for about 850 crore rupees. The deal is expected to be the first leg of a bigger stake acquisition. 5 companies make their debut on Dalal Street: Concord and Vero, Dam Capital, Mamta Machinery, Sanathan Textiles and Transrail Lighting clock strong gains. The listings are likely to boost primary market sentiment. The government is considering a new index to track insurance pricing. Sources say the index capturing the trends in life and general insurance premium can be included in the inflation basket to represent services. Top-level resignations continue at Ola Electric. Sources say Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Technology Officer have stepped down. More than 500 employees have left the company in the last couple of months. Osamu Suzuki, the man who led the Japanese automaker into India, passes away at the age of 94. He led Suzuki Motors for 4 decades and paved the way for joint venture called Maruti Suzuki, which commands over 40% share in India today.
I, Manmohan Singh, do swear in the name of God
प्रधानमंत्री के रूप में देश के विकास में और प्रगति में उनके योगदान को हमेशा याद किया जाएगा।
I am not going to be a candidate for the Prime Ministership if the UPA were to come back into power.
I can tell you that here at the G20, when the Prime Minister speaks, people listen.
माना कि तेरी दीद के काबिल नहीं हूँ मैं, तू मेरा शौक तो देख, मेरा इंतजार देख।
Dr. Manmohan Singh, India's former Prime Minister who unleashed India's economy as a former finance minister, has died at the age of 92. He was suffering from age-related ailments. A doctorate in economics from UK's Oxford University, Manmohan Singh's tryst with public service began in the early 70s when he was appointed as an economic advisor in the Commerce Ministry. Singh held multiple roles in top echelons of the bureaucracy in the 70s and the early 80s before heading to the Reserve Bank as its governor in 1982. One of the key hallmarks of his illustrious career came in the year 1991 when he, as the finance minister in the Narasimha Rao government, unshackled the Indian economy from the licensed Raj and opened up the economy with liberalization, privatization and globalization. A twist of fate saw Manmohan Singh, who had never fought a Lok Sabha election till then and thereafter, being catapulted to the post of Prime Minister. He led a coalition of parties cutting across the political spectrum. His decade-long tenure saw the introduction of some landmark legislations, including right to information, rural jobs guarantee, right to education, food security, the Indo-US nuclear deal. In fact, the left party's opposition to the nuclear deal almost brought the UPA to the brink of collapse in 2008. But he held firm and stabilized India's relationship with the world's largest economy. Manmohan Singh's second term as Prime Minister began with firefighting the global financial crisis. The second term also saw a number of alleged scams, especially related to 2G, telecom spectrum and the coal sector. Opposition and critics often labelled him as the silent Prime Minister. Facing severe criticism, Dr. Singh quipped to media in 2014 that history will be kinder to him.
पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी के निधन ने हम सभी के हृदय को गहरी पीड़ा पहुंचाई है। उनका जाना एक राष्ट्र के रूप में भी हमारे लिए बहुत बड़ी क्षति है। जनता के प्रति, देश के विकास के प्रति उनका जो कमिटमेंट था, उसे हमेशा बहुत सम्मान से देखा जाएगा। आज इस कठिन घड़ी में मैं उनके परिवार के प्रति अपनी संवेदनाएं व्यक्त करता हूं। मैं डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी को सभी देशवासियों की तरफ से श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करता हूं।
I worked with him in the Planning Commission, and then I worked with him when he was Finance Minister. Then I worked with him when he was out of power in the Congress Party. Then I worked with him when he was Prime Minister. So for 36 years, I've worked with him very, very closely, very intimately, very many memories of our association. Well, what can I say? He led a full life. It was a full life, extremely full life, and it was an extraordinarily distinguished life. Chief Economic Advisor, Chief Economic Advisor, Finance Secretary, Member Secretary Planning Commission, Governor Reserve Bank of India, Deputy Chairman Planning Commission, Finance Minister, Prime Minister. I can't think of anybody in India who's had all these posts.
Mrs. Sonia Gandhi stood by him like a rock. She named him as Prime Minister, and she was vindicated when in the second election, and that is 2009, we got 61 more seats. Therefore, but then the errors were committed, not personal mistakes of Dr. Manmohan Singh, but the system did not exercise adequate control over the ministers and the ministries and their policies. And the system let him down in the second term, but he was quite stoical.
An economist by qualification, Dr. Manmohan Singh straddled multiple roles, that of an academician, bureaucrat and even the RBI governor in the 80s. We spoke to 3 former governors who paid glowing tributes to Dr. Singh.
At the end of the devaluation decision that we took, Dr. Manmohan Singh said that, look, as a result of this, perhaps I may gain because I have some dollars to come from whatever work that I have done. But I am willing, he said, to surrender the excess because of the decision. I think that is so forthright on his part to say that, yes, we take the decision from a national point of view. If I have gained, I will give it out. Look at the national point of view and do what is right, and what happens to the individual is the second. So I think that kind of an approach to the problem is something that one has to learn from him.
I think Dr. Manmohan Singh had great regard for the Reserve Bank of India. He understood that the Reserve Bank is a treasure trove of knowledge. If he wanted an opinion from an outside government source, We always sought the RBI's opinion, like I said, about the FDI and single brand retail. He sought our opinion about the land acquisition bill. He sought our opinion about the NREGA expansion. And you also, once he asked me sometime, about 6 months after I'd gone into the Reserve Bank, why is everybody talking about the Reserve Bank policy? And I just kept quiet. Then he said, something very, as if he spoke to himself. He said, the RBI is a great institution. Everybody should not be talking about what the RBI ought to be doing.
He was an economist in a sense, because as you pointed out in the initial reforms he carried out, you had to have faith in the theory, that the theory would work, that in the face of a currency crisis, you liberalized imports. Ordinarily one would think that would suddenly boost imports and you would have more of a problem. But he saw that as part of a package which would set India on a new course. And I think, we've had 3 decades of robust growth since then. 6% by and large, something nations would kill for. And I think he laid the foundations for that, of course, along with Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. But the initial reforms when he was finance minister, I mean, that is huge, and it still plays out today.
And India Inc. stalwarts also fondly remembered Manmohan Singh for his efforts in uplifting the Indian economy.
He was single-handedly responsible for opening up the banking sector for private sector engagement. He understood the need for competition. He understood the need for new players. And we saw a lot of that reform and opening up in the banking sector also happen under him. And the benefit we had with him in these roles, both at RBI and as finance minister, was someone who no one could argue with his understanding of things that were needed for the economy.
So Dr. Manmohan Singh was always a very warm person, a very simple individual with whom anyone could have an easy conversation. He was meaningful. He was always brief in his interaction, but would always listen. He was a person who genuinely appeared concerned for all humanity and certainly for all Indians. His attempt was to figure out a way to develop all geographies of India and all peoples of India.
From Manrega to right to education to food security, the prime ministerial tenure of Manmohan Singh saw a number of landmark legislations taking shape. Shivani Bazaz is here with the list.
As the Prime Minister of India from 2004 to 2014, Dr. Manmohan Singh continued to shape the nation with his transformative policies. The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, the Manrega, launched in 2005, provided a lifeline to millions of rural households by guaranteeing 100 days of wage employment annually. It not only reduced poverty, but also empowered rural India by creating sustainable infrastructure. The Right to Information Act, also enacted in 2005, was another milestone under his leadership. This law revolutionized governance by giving citizens the power to hold public institutions accountable, making transparency a cornerstone of Indian democracy. In 2009, his government introduced the Right to Education Act, making free and compulsory education a fundamental right for children aged 6 to 14. This initiative significantly increased school enrollments and helped bridge gaps in access to education for marginalized communities in India. The National Food Security Act, passed in 2013, addressed one of India's most pressing issues, hunger. By providing subsidized food grains to over 2/3 of the population, it became a crucial tool in reducing malnutrition and ensuring food security for the underprivileged. Dr. Manmohan Singh also laid the foundation for the Aadhaar program in 2009, aiming to give every Indian a unique identity. Today, Aadhaar is the backbone of countless welfare programs, enabling targeted delivery and financial inclusion in India. Another initiative that began under his leadership was the Direct Benefit Transfer (DBT) program, launched in 2013. DBT marked a major shift in welfare delivery by transferring subsidies directly to the beneficiary's bank account. While in its pilot stages during his tenure, it reduced leakages, streamlined processes, and laid the groundwork for large-scale implementation in the subsequent years. Back to you.
We also spoke to former presidents of Maldives and Afghanistan who paid rich tributes to Manmohan Singh.
One specific moment that I very vividly remember is the COP19, when countries were not able to come together and find an understanding during that conference of the parties. It was Prime Minister Manmohan Singh who brought all the countries together. And there was an evening when we had an unofficial meeting of 25 countries, which was led by the Prime Minister. I think we have lost a father figure for not only South Asia, India and South Asia, but to the world.
Dr. Manmohan Singh was a close friend and ally of Afghanistan and helped the Afghan people in many, many ways during his time in office. I remember him as a learned man with profound dignity and humility. And on all his visits to Afghanistan and my visits to India, we had the best of engagement and relationship that led us, both countries, to a strategic partnership and to the benefits, especially to the Afghan people that came from this relationship. He is a leading element for the reconstruction that we saw during his time in office. We are grateful to him.
As global leaders pay tributes to Manmohan Singh, here is a moment between Dr. Singh and former US President Barack Obama when he visited the White House in 2009.
I've said before, and I continue to believe that the extraordinary leadership that Prime Minister Singh has provided, not just to India, but to the world, has helped us navigate through some very difficult times. And I can tell you that here at the G20, when the Prime Minister speaks, people listen, particularly because of his deep knowledge of economic issues, as well as the fact that he understands that as India rises as a world power, not just a regional power, that it also has enormous responsibilities to work with the rest of the world community around issues of peace and prosperity.
You're watching India Business Hour. The Indian rupee hit a new low yet again. The rupee had a roller coaster trading day at one point. The rupee was on pace for its worst single day fall in 2 years, but a late intervention by RBI managed to claw back some gains. But despite that, the rupee ended at record low levels. Lata Venkatesh is here with a wrap of the money market action.
It was an extremely zigzag movement in the currency. For the first time after the Trump election, since when we have been seeing a slow depreciation of the rupee, we saw a rapid depreciation. We saw a 50 paise giveaway of the rupee from about 85.27, that was the overnight close, all the way to 85.75. This has not happened in a very, very long time, perhaps not even since 2013 or thereabouts, if I remember right. But the usual reasons are there. Dollar has been strong over the 108.2 mark or 108.1 mark. As far as the dollar index is concerned, importer buying, which is normal towards the month end, oil importer buying, all that were there. But why was the rupee allowed to depreciate so much? It's quite possible that the Reserve Bank decided to give the rupee an adjustment mode today because of the Reserve Bank bulletin in December indicating that in November, the rupee was 8% overvalued. We always get that data with a month's lag. Perhaps the Reserve Bank smelt that there are speculative forces at work after looking at that number, and they just let them have their play. Why should they get an exit at a higher price? Perhaps that was the reason, but the Reserve Bank was absent for some time. That was one reason why the rupee fell. A second reason why the rupees, people are guessing fell was because the NDF market, the offshore market for the rupee, where the rupee is traded as a derivative, there the Reserve Bank had positions, today's expiry day in that market, and probably some of the positions were shifted onto the local market and settled. And that also put some pressure on the rupee. Be that as it may, the Reserve Bank suddenly made its appearance at 85.7, and then the losses of the currency were cut by half. That's broadly the story today.
India's current account deficit narrowed marginally in the September quarter, coming in at 1.2% of the GDP. The current account deficit, which is an indicator of the country's external payment scenario, came in at around $11.2 billion in the second quarter of the fiscal. Trade deficit came in higher compared to the same period last year, but was countered by a rise in services exports and in remittances by Indians living abroad. Now to all the stock market action. The Lal Street ended in the green, but well below the day's high point. Nifty managed to hold on to 23,800 to end 0.25% in the green. Mid-caps underperformed the blue chips to end the day in the red. For the week, market managed to give positive returns, with auto and pharma seeing buying, while metals were the top losers. In corporate news, a subsidiary of JSW Energy called JSW Neo Energy has signed a deal to acquire O2 Power for nearly $1.5 billion. This amounts to an enterprise valuation of nearly 12,500 crore rupees. O2 Power is a joint venture between Swedish asset manager EQT Partners and Singapore's Temasek, and it has a capacity of nearly 4,700 megawatts. Ultratech Cement has acquired 8.69% stake in Star Cement for 851 crore rupees. The shares were acquired at 235 rupees a piece. Meghalaya-based Star Cement has a 7.7 million ton per annum capacity in East India. The deal is expected to be the first leg of a bigger stake acquisition. Moving on to Ola Electric, the company has seen two top-level exits. The firm's Chief Marketing Officer, Anshul Khandelwal, and the Chief Technology Officer, Subhanil Chatterjee, have stepped down from their roles. This comes just months after Ola Electric undertook a major reorganization. Chatterjee joined the company 6 years ago and was pivotal in developing key products, including Ola Krutrim and Ola Maps. Khandelwal, who joined the company in 2019, steadily rose through the ranks to become the Chief Marketing Officer. Let's shift focus to an important story from the Indian economy. The gap between urban and rural India is narrowing, according to the government's annual household expenditure and consumption survey. The bottom 5% of rural population saw a 22% increase in consumption, but the gap between the rich and the poor remains stark. The top 5% is spending and consuming 5 times more than the bottom 5%, even as they see a decline in consumption. Sapna Das is here with all the details.
Well, indeed, the government has come out with the household consumption expenditure survey that has been released, and what the findings indicate is that the monthly per capita consumption expenditure has shot up both for rural and urban India. For rural India, the growth rate is higher than urban India. For instance, the average MPC is around over 4,000 odd rupees for rural India. The growth rate here is around 9.2%. In comparison, the absolute term for urban India, of course, will be higher, close to around 7,000 rupees, but the growth rate is around 8 odd percent. That's one. Second, also in terms of the bottom 5% of the population, for rural India, the monthly per capita consumption expenditure has gone up around 22 odd percent. In comparison, the consumption expenditure for urban India, the bottom 5% of the population, that has grown by around 19 odd percent. So basically, Y-on-Y, the consumption activity for rural India has been higher in comparison to the urban India. Now, the other aspect that also needs to be noted is that while the bottom 5% of rural and urban India, both the consumption expenditure is expanding, however, for the top 5% of the population, the expenditure has actually come down. So, for rural India, the top 5% of the population is their expenditure is a negative 3.5% consumption expenditure, whereas for urban India, it's a negative 2.53%. That needs to be noted. Last but not the least, interestingly enough, the consumption expenditure on household items for rural India has really gone up. From a 46.38%, it has now gone up to around 48%. That's a sizable rise to speak about. For urban India also it has gone up, but not as much as rural India. These are some of the key findings. We'll have to wait and watch and see what further comes out from this survey.
All right, as we wrap India Business Hour, we leave you with the poetic side of Manmohan Singh. Dr. Singh's love for Urdu poetry was well known. More on that as we go into a break.
आप उर्दू जबान समझते हैं बहुत अच्छी तरह से और शेरों में बहुत बड़ी ताकत होती है अपनी बात को आसानी से सहजता से कहने की। आज एक शेर पूछ करके मैं आपसे जवाब पूछना चाहती हूँ। तू इधर उधर की ना बात कर, ये बता कि काफिला क्यों लूटा। तू इधर उधर की ना बात कर, ये बता कि काफिला क्यों लूटा। हमें रहजनों से गिरा नहीं, तेरी रहबरी का ख्याल है।
माना कि तेरी दीद के काबिल नहीं हूँ मैं। माना कि तेरी दीद के काबिल नहीं हूँ मैं। तू मेरा शौक तो देख, मेरा इंतजार देख।